I haven't introduced myself.
To Twas. I'm Reverend Kathy. To Ricky, and I serve as the interim minister here at our Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Boca Raton. Thank you for being here today. The first time I attended a winter solstice party, I was a member of the Emerson Unitarian Universalist congregation in Marietta, Georgia. I had been a Unitarian Universalist for about 10 years, and at that point, I'd never taken part in any earth-centered rituals or any pagan celebrations. A fellow member of Emerson hosted the party, and when the time came for the ceremony, we left her brightly lit, warm, climate-controlled home and traversed her backyard to her cold garage, where there was a room for the solstice tree, a smaller version of what the fellowship has here every year, and room for dancing in the dark. And when we were all plunged into darkness, I remember feeling a bit unnerved when the lights went out, and I felt plenty awkward dancing with people in the dark. But that soon gave way to a sense of peace. When the Yule log was lit, set ablaze, I had the feeling that all was right with the world, no matter the deeds of humankind for good or bad or indifferent. The earth on its tilted axis would continue to rotate around the sun as it had done for millennia before I was born, and would continue to do so after I died. I was reminded of what is enduring in the natural world, which gave me a sense of being grounded, connected, cradled. I felt very much a part of the workings of this earth and the cosmos in which we live and have our being. Now, it seems to me that inside and outside our Unitarian Universalist world, in our rather traditionalist culture, that paganism gets a bad rap. Many people associate it with things evil. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, many Christian holidays have elements of paganism in them, such as bringing evergreens indoors and decorating them, burning a Yule log, as suggested in our hymn today, deck the hall, one hall, but boughs, multiple boughs of holly. A bough of holly is an ancient Norse symbol for peace. For Norse people, to stand under the holly bough was to make peace with themselves or someone that they might have been at odds with. It was a symbol of reconciliation, a time to let bygones be bygones. Why is it that the new year in our Western culture begins in the dark, so to speak, in a time of short days and long nights? Why is it that even though scholars think that Jesus was born sometime in the month of April, his birth is celebrated in December? And why is it that even Judaism contains vestiges of ancient Roman paganism? The Mishnah and the Talmud, which are teachings and interpretations of Hebrew scripture, describe an 8-day festival leading up to the winter solstice called Saturna. Scholars say that there is little doubt that there is a connection between that ancient ritual and the celebration of Hanukkah. It's a matter of light. It's called a festival of light. And in this northern hemisphere, in our western side of it, our instinct is to light up that darkness. In the first few centuries after Jesus' death, both the Jewish people and early Christians living under Roman rule, they benefited from some of these pagan rituals and acculturation because they could combine or adapt their own practices and perhaps not be considered heretical by Roman standards. Now, it's interesting that this got completely turned around in the late fourth century after Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire. It was the pagans in far Western Europe, such as the Celts, the Druids, the Gaels, who had to blend their practices with early Christian traditions. But either way, Western religion as we know it today, they were influenced by this ancient Roman pagan festival of Saturnalia. Saturnalia honored the agricultural deity Saturn. It was celebrated from December 17th through the 23rd. It was a celebration of days leading to the winter solstice, and it featured gift giving, revelry, and liberating turnover in social norms such that masters bowed to their servants. And a later add-on to Saturnalia was the celebration of the return of light with the birthday of the unconquerable sun, S-U-N. That date was, perhaps you guessed, December 25th. So there's really no such thing as pure culture, a pure religion or a tradition. As the saying goes, there's nothing new under the sun. We all share in many crossovers, acculturation, adaptations, accommodations, when culture meets culture. And throughout history, it's been more like a collision because most ancient encounters were via conquest, foreign occupation, crusade, missionary imperatives, one dominant culture over and against others. But even so, we have inherited as Christian and Jewish traditions, they are actually a kind of a mashup. And there's really nothing that speaks to that in Unitarian Universalism more than being today's subject of hanging the greens and having Happy Hanukkah on our wall, because next week we are going to be celebrating the Festival of Lights. But I want to give you an example of how the mashup can get mixed up in pop culture in our time. It's been a number of years ago, but I recall a social media frenzy that occurred after a cable news commentator made the claim on air that Santa is white. And after doing a little research, I discovered that the commentator's words, in all fairness, they were taken out of context. Well, that's no surprise to us today, right? But yes. But still, the assumptions behind Santa being ethnically white, I think it's ironic in the sense of a lack of awareness. And I wonder how often we stop to think that Santa Claus and Christmas trees have nothing at all to do with the legends of St. Nicholas or the birth of Jesus. We can all lapse into thinking we are the owners of the traditions that are near and dear to our hearts. But the truth is, our beloved traditions go way back and arise out of multiple cultural settings. For example, Santa Claus, you know that big guy with the big beard and all dressed in red and white fur? That's actually an advertisement, an invention of an advertising campaign. I believe it was Coca-Cola, but I may be wrong about that. The original Saint Nicholas was a 4th century Christian from Asia Minor, and he was not ethnically white Euro. Further, our Christmas trees harken back to a time when the Celts were hanging evergreen boughs over their doors to ward off evil spirits. Today, hanging of the greens is the practice of bringing live evergreen plants into congregational spaces, often in conjunction with Advent, which is the first 4 Sundays preceding Christmas. Now, on their website, I picked one at random, the United Methodist Church states that when used at Christmas, evergreens are often understood as the symbol of the eternal coming to dwell among us as Word made flesh. These greens may also be described as a sign of life and growth, overcoming and flourishing in the midst of the dead of winter, and so of the resurrection of Christ. Now, evergreen is an apt symbol of Christian theology. But this definition omits the origins of the practice, and to me, closely defining hanging of the greens within the confines of Christianity, while omitting that the practice is an adaptation. It is Christianity's adaptation to the Celtic, earth-centered religions of the British Isles. So, without that acknowledgement, the understanding of the practice is limited, and to me, it creates the same heartburn that an ethnically white Santa does. This fellowship has enjoyed a robust practice of bringing the symbols of evergreens into this sanctuary. And what does that mean for you? What does it mean for us as pluralistic Unitarian Universalists? At this time of year, my ancestors nailed evergreen boughs over their doors to ward off evil spirits. Your ancestors may have celebrated Saturnalia at the end of the harvest season. And others may have lived in climes where cultural practices are not tied to 4 seasons, but to the rhythms of nature and the lands on which they depend. We come into the sanctuary carrying with us a rich diversity of cultural history, ethnicity, religion, and identity. Yet we come together sharing in the culture of this fellowship and its own version of hanging of the greens. Now I'm going to take a moment to say that right now we are obviously lacking in greenery here, right? And the reason for holding up this practice is that we all are invited to participate as we are able and willing to getting the greens out of the attic and down on the floor, so where we can start bringing them in here, right? We're actually kind of a week late on that, but that's okay. But this is a very important part of the life of this congregation. I ask you to take what the symbolism of the evergreen, the ongoing life in which we are immersed. Take what the symbolism offers with a sense of being grounded in the earth as our home, as our provider, as our garden, if you will. This time of year, there tends to be a real tension between our reality of living and with all of its imperfections and its unpredictability and often its sorrows, but also its joys. We live in a tension with that and the kind of perfectionism and sheen and shininess that the consumptive aspect of our culture brings to us and brings with the season. It's become very commercialized. So I ask that at this time of year, take a cue from the greening of our sanctuary and remember the garden. And perhaps we need to return to the garden in our spirit, in our living, in what we value. This earth is a gift. I'm grateful to learn and practice the earth-centered traditions that remind us of our dependence on the land and the interdependence of sharing this biosphere with other human beings and other species that far outnumber us. Let not the trappings of our holiday celebrations become more important than the reality of our fragile yet enduring existence. And many of us may not need this reminder, but let us be reminded and humbled that we each are a very small part of a much larger scheme of life on this earth and all its diversity. This season, let us engage the courage, kindness, and compassion shown by exemplars of the past that are held up at this time of the year. Let us engage the fortitude of the small band of Maccabees holding out against an army of a tyrannical ruler. Let us emulate Jesus, casting his lot with the downtrodden and speaking truth to power in his homeland. Let us all be Saint Nicholas, giving gifts to those in need and intervening on behalf of the vulnerable in our community. What inspired these exemplars to act in extraordinary ways can inspire us to leave our climate-controlled spaces, our screens, but most of all, our comfort, to connect with the real world that needs our compassion and care. So let us be merry. Let us hang the greens. Yule is a time to make peace. And this holiday season, may we aspire to be kind and compassionate first to ourselves and then to others. If we can take the cheer of Yuletide out into the world during this holiday season, I promise that we will all be just a little bit better off for it. I hope it may be so. Our Share the Plate today, our collection, we share with DISC once again.